CSIS 1430 is filmed before a live studio audience.
So let's just quickly review a few things, right? What the heck is Bootstrap? Give me the nutshell. What do I keep saying to you? It's just somebody else's style sheet, right? It's also somebody else's JavaScript, okay? Now, in the past, what we've done, we have hot linked to the Bootstrap webpage, right, to get their style sheet and everything, okay? Well, now we're going to see how to do it the real way, where you download it, okay? So if we go to getbootstrap.com, as of yesterday, version 5 is here. Just released yesterday, beta. So I told you I thought it was going to be sometime next year, but here it is right now. So right in the middle of recording this set of videos, right, they changed it to the new version. So we're going to talk about that for just a minute. Then we're going to look at, we're staying with 4.5 for the videos, right? This is still new. It's in beta 1, and who knows what tweaks they're going to make to it, but it is now where you can use it in your projects, okay? So let's just go look at the documentation here. You'll recall I mentioned the other day to make sure when you look at the documentations, you're on the correct version of what you're using, right? So right there, version 5, right? So we're looking at 5 for just a minute. What happened, I went there last night to look something up, and I came to this page and I was looking at the JavaScript part, and I'm like, where the heck is the jQuery at? And then I noticed up in the right-hand corner, oh, this is version 5. It's live. Like, they just sprung it on us out of nowhere. So jQuery's gone. That's one of the big things. We mentioned that. Unfortunately, we're still using it for 4.5, so we'll get to that in a minute. But version 5, it's gone. The other thing is, I thought that cards, which we haven't learned yet, but I thought that cards were going to be removed from version 5. But I don't know where I got that information, but I was wrong. They're still there. So we're going to look at cards today with 4.5. And there's a bunch of other stuff. I'll show you one big difference here. So what I have on the screen here, this is version 5, and then on the other screen over here, this is version 4.5 right here, okay? So if you'll recall, when we clicked on layout in 4.5, there's only really two things, right? There's the overview, but then there's just grid and utilities. Version 5, if we come to layout, a whole bunch more stuff, right? Breakpoints, containers, grid, columns, gutters, utilities, z-index. I have no idea everything they added, right? This is brand new, just came out. It's been in alpha for a while, but I haven't really looked at the documentation. But I do know a couple things they did. Number one, I know what the gutters is about, and that is if you remember in CSS grid, you had the grid gap where you could put a little gap between your cells. This is dealing with the Bootstrap grid, where you can now put little margins and gutters between your Bootstrap grid, right? I don't know how it works yet. I haven't looked at the documentation, but that's what that's about. Then breakpoints here, they have added another breakpoint for extra large. So 2XL, that's the little key that you'll use. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff, none of which we're going to dive into, but it's here now. You can go read the documentation. When you go to getbootstrap.com, it takes you to version 5, which tells me they want us to start using it, right? They wouldn't take us to the one that was all broken, right? They will be tweaking and adding things as we go along. And if you go to the blog post right here, so they say, with our first beta release of Bootstrap 5, we're calling it on new features and breaking changes. So what they mean, we're calling it as in we're done. We're calling it good. We're done making major changes. From here on out, we'll only fine-tune features, bugs, and documentation on our way to a stable version 5 release. So it's just going to be finding little goofs and bugs and stuff that's in the code. That's it. So it's done. They're not going to have new class names all of a sudden. I mean, there may be some new class names that weren't in 4.5, but with version 5, they're done. All the class names are there. They may fix them and make them work better, but they're not going to change them, right? So that's all I know about 5, and that's actually probably more than I really know. I probably said stuff didn't know what I was talking about, right? So we're going to leave 5 and get back to what we are been working on, which is 4.5. So as I mentioned before, we were hot linking to get everything, right? So we'd come to the home page here, and normally we'd just click get started, but because we want to use 4.5, we're going to go previous releases and go to 4.5 right here. And then what we did, we copied this, right? And then we copied these two guys right here. There's jQuery and there's the Bootstrap file. Okay? We copied all that, put it in our project, and we were good to go. Well, now let's look at how the heck do we download it. Okay? If you look on the left over here, download right there. And now there's a couple different options here. I'm going to give you the one and only option that you should really use. All right? Okay, first of all, if you scroll down, there's this whole bit about package managers. Okay? Everything that's after that title package manager, ignore it. This is advanced stuff that advanced developers use. I've been a web developer since the web's been a thing. Literally, since the early 90s when the World Wide Web became a thing, I've been doing this stuff. And I still never use these, okay? So it just depends on how you have it set up. There's some command line stuff, and you usually have to have Ruby installed. And it's typically mostly Mac users that do it, but you even as a Mac user, you don't have to necessarily do this, right? So just ignore the package manager stuff for now. If you want to explore it on your own and you got some time under your belt, then go ahead and do it. The next thing here, you can actually download the examples if you want. So the other day we looked at some of these right here at the top here, the examples page. We open those up. There's a bunch of these little templates here, okay? You can actually download those if you want to. So you can get the code and play around with them and use them, and they're good starter, sort of like seed code to get you started on your projects or whatever. So feel free to download those as well if you want to. And then we have these two right here. These are the two we're going to talk about the most. Download and download source, okay? The one I'm going to encourage you to use is this one right here, download, okay? This is compiled CSS and JavaScript. Now the first thing you might be thinking is, well, wait a minute, what's compiled? Where's the compiler? We don't use compilers in JavaScript or CSS or anything like that. So let me kind of show you what that's about, and then we'll get to those. So what you're looking at on the screen right here, on the left, believe it or not, is, we'll call it pre-CSS, okay? It's not something that came before CSS existed. It's code that will be converted into CSS. This is called pre-processing. We're not going to learn how to do it. We're not going to learn the syntax. I just want to show you that it is a thing, right? So one of the most popular preprocessors that everybody uses, myself included, that code you're looking at on the left is code I wrote. That's how I write my CSS when I'm not in this classroom, right? That looks nothing like the CSS that I've taught you guys, right? Notice the lack of curly braces. Notice the lack of semicolons. There's some indentation happening there that makes things work, and there's that ampersand, colon, what's all that business about, okay? Not the point of the screen here, or the slide here, but I want to make sure that you understand this is different syntax. What happens, there's a piece of software you can download, and you run this code through the software, SAS in this particular case, and it compiles it and turns it into that. That's what you guys know. Now on small projects, I just write raw CSS like this, but on big projects, I have a whole bunch of SAS files, and it's a big messy disaster on my laptop that makes sense in my brain, but when all is said and done, I run it through the SAS compiler, and it spits out one big fat humongous style sheet, right? So this converts the thing on the left to the thing on the right. SAS is by far the most popular one of these, but there are several others out there. That one on the top left, I think it's called Post. Then there's Stylus, SAS. You also hear SAS called SCSS, right? SAS stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheet, right? And then Less is also a pretty popular one, but by far SAS is the most popular. So what this does is it speeds up development, right? You get to write it on your computer, on your laptop or whatever, super fast without the curly braces, semicolons, and all this stuff. Compile it, and then it makes you a style sheet that you upload to your server. This is also a thing for HTML. Okay, there's the top left one, that's actually their logo. It's called Slim, and it's the same kind of thing where you write it in a different syntax. You don't have to bother writing the angle brackets and putting quotes around your properties and things like this, depending on which one you use, Pug or Haml. Haml's the most popular, but the whole idea is you just write simpler code. You run it through a compiler, and it turns it into the regular old HTML that you know. They also have some for JavaScript. This one on the left is called TypeScript. There's also one called LiveScript. I couldn't find a logo for it, so it's not there. There's Babel, and then there's CoffeeScript. And again, You type it one way in a simplified format, and then the compiler turns it into the real JavaScript. Okay? It doesn't replace JavaScript, it just makes it to where you don't have to type as much stuff. Okay? It makes things faster. So why am I telling you all this, right? We're not going to use it at all in this class. I don't think anywhere in the school do we even teach it, okay? But you need to understand it for the next thing we're going to look at, okay? So I'm going to download the compiled version first, and it's just a zip file, and then I'm going to download the source. This is the uncompiled version. All right, so here on the desktop, there's the one that has the dist in it. That's the one that I'm going to encourage you to use. So let's unzip that real quick. Extract it. All right, so here is the dist, which stands for distribution or whatever. And if you look inside of it, it's just a JavaScript folder and a CSS folder. Okay, you recall the other day I had a CSS file that I called style, but it was really this one right here, and I just renamed it to kind of trick you guys, right, to make you think that it was my code. So in the CSS folder here that we just downloaded off of the Bootstrap site, there looks like a bunch of stuff, but it's really not that much. So thing number one, you'll see there's this map. Each of these that have the .map extension, ignore those. Those are for working with browsers that have different developer tools in it, and it's just beyond the scope of what we care about. So ignore those, okay? Just gonna delete those. And what you're left with is really only 3 files. It looks like 6, but it's really 3. Because you have Bootstrap, then you have Bootstrap min, right? Then we have Bootstrap grid, and then we have grid min. Then we have reboot and reboot min. Those are pairs of files that are the same content. They're just one's been minified where all the spaces have been removed. So the one that we used the other day that I was tricking you guys with is right here. And you'll recall it was 10,000 lines of CSS, right? That is the entire Bootstrap style sheet right there. You put that in your project, you're good to go. As far as the CSS dependencies go, right? You still have to put the JavaScript stuff in. But if you want, you can use the minified version, which is exactly the same code, but all the spaces have been removed. Okay, it's exactly the same. So it makes it literally just one big long line, right? Just one line of code. And just to prove the point here, look at the last line here, right? T-head dark, TH color, just kind of remember that. We come here to the bottom, and what do we see there? That exact thing right there. Just all the spaces removed, okay? So that's the entire Bootstrap experience for CSS. If, however, you only wanted just the grid components, well, just use that. And here it is right here, and you'll see it's much smaller. It's 3,800 lines of code instead of 10,000. And of course, there's the minified version right here, right? And it's the same thing, it's just all minified, okay? And then last, there is the reboot, where you can use the minified version. Let's look at the regular version. The reboot is just overriding the default of the tags. You'll notice there are no classes in here, right? All the orange, those are actual tags. Okay, there's no specific classes here. This is just the default behavior of how a block quote's going to behave, or a small, or a sub, or a hovering over an anchor, or a pre-tag, or whatever, right? It's just overriding the default. So if maybe you just wanted to sort of revamp the basic look of a page and not change anything else, you can start with this one, okay? And this one's, again, a lot smaller. It's only 300 lines of code, not very much. So this is just a good reset, right? You know how we do in ours at the very top, star, and we set padding to 0 and margin to 0? This is like a 300 line version of that, just resetting everything, okay? And then there's the minified version, right? So those are the 3 style sheets, and if you want all of them, you just get Bootstrap, just that one right there, okay? So we're going to use the minified version in our project. And on the desktop here, I have Metallica. That's our project for the day. And inside of CSS, I'm just going to move the Bootstrap minified version right there. That's it. Okay, so I have the minified version right there, and I'm done with that part of it. Now let's look over at the folder on the right is the stuff we downloaded from Bootstrap. So go to JavaScript here. And you get the same idea going on here, right? Ignore the maps. We'll just delete those. And all you're looking at here is the bundle, which has everything, or just the Bootstrap by itself. So Bootstrap uses another library called Popper, Popper, which is still going to be part of version 5. Well, they have the Popper code inside of the bundle right here, or you can get just only the Bootstrap stuff right here. We're going to use the one with the Popper, right? So come over here, JavaScript, and move the bundle right there. And it's the same thing where there's a minified version, right, with all the stuff gone, and then there's a non-minified version. Okay, so now, right now, our Metallica project on the left, close that out, and I'm gonna close this. That folder that we just downloaded from Bootstrap, we don't even need it anymore. We've got the folders, we got the JavaScript and the CSS, we're good. So I'm gonna delete that, and then I'm gonna delete the zip file. But I wanna show you this other one that's the uncompiled, okay? It's crazy how different it is. You're gonna notice it takes a lot longer to unzip. Remember the other one a minute ago just took a second? And when you look inside, notice it's not just JavaScript and a CSS folder anymore, right? It's a whole bunch of other stuff here. It's also some of the documentation. It's the Git files, if you're familiar with GitHub, or just Git in general. It has all the stuff for that. If you look inside the JavaScript folder here, there's a bunch of extra folders in here, right? And a whole bunch of other extra stuff in here. The preprocessor or the compiler that they use turns it into that one JavaScript file, right? But this is all the raw stuff before they did that, okay? So you look in the SCSS, that's the Sass stuff basically, and look at all these folders, these files I mean, right? All this stuff is mixed together, run it through the compiler, and poof, it just gives you that style sheet. But the advantage of this is if you know Sass, you can have this on your computer and you can edit the Sass yourself and then recompile it, right? And a lot of people do that. And they've made it even easier in version 5. That's something else I know about version 5, that taking the raw stuff and messing with it is a lot easier, okay? So we're not going to use that version. We're just going to delete that and delete that. Okay, so if we go into our project here now, let's open this up. So right now we just need to link to those files, right? So we need to link to our style sheet, which was called bootstrap.min.css, right? And then we have the script file right there, okay? So we're almost there. The only thing that's missing is the jQuery component, right? jQuery is its own library, so we can either hot link to jQuery or we can download it. We're going to download it, okay? But let's just see what's going on so far. We do have the CSS right here, and so if we do something like, div class equals container, and we just say hello, we'll put that in the H1 or something, hello, and div, and then we run this file, we should see that the Bootstrap styles are being applied. And yeah, that's definitely Bootstrap, okay? So we have the CSS working, but remember with the Navbar, for example, you need the JavaScript stuff. Well, their JavaScript depends on jQuery, which we don't have yet. So you could hot link it like we've been doing and just hot link that part of it, or let's just download it, okay? So here we go. We're gonna go to jQuery.com and click on the download button and just grab the one right there at the top, okay? And if you click on it, it's going to take you to the actual code, right? We don't want to do that, okay? So instead of that, right click on it and save link as, and it's going to download the minified version, okay? Just like the Bootstrap stuff, you can go find the non-minified version and all the other stuff, right? But just grab this one. It's the minified. We're going to put it right here inside of our JavaScript folder, and I'm going to grab that so I can copy and paste it in my code. There we go. Now in our code, final thing, we're just going to replace that right there with jQuery. That's it. Okay? Put the jQuery before the bundle, the Bootstrap, right? So now we have everything we need, and we're not hot linking to anything. And when we upload this project to our server, we're uploading our copy of jQuery, we're uploading our copy of Bootstrap and everything. And so if the only way that Bootstrap won't work is if our server goes down, right? Well, if it goes down, then everything else is broken anyway, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so I know that was a lot, kind of a mouthful. That's why I didn't show it to you on the first day. I didn't want to break your brains, right? So now, though, that you understand kind of what Bootstrap's all about, now you know different ways to get your hands on the code, okay? Hot linking is fine. For now, just hot link, it's fine, I don't care. But once you get into production, you're going to use this in a live site, you'll definitely want to download the files, okay? Questions on that? All right, let's learn some new stuff now. We got all the boring crap out of the way, right? Let's look at a couple new things. Thing number one we're going to look at is in a navigation bar, we're going to learn how to make a little drop-down menu, right? So let's start by trying to remember, how do we make a navigation bar? I'll help you out. It's going to start with a nav, right? Okay. So what else was in that nav? Do you remember? Yeah, it had the actual navigation itself, and then we had one other thing on the left. Do you remember that? Yeah, the company brand or whatever, right? So let's just make this simple here. Don't worry about the classes or anything. Let's just look at the markup. So we have the brand, just an anchor tag, and it's going to be Metallica site today. And then we had the navigation, right? Just a UL. And of course our navigation, this is the stuff we've been doing long before we learned about Bootstrap, right? And we're going to go home, anchor, close the LI, right? And we'll do maybe an about, like a merchandise page, and an about, and like tour dates or something, right? And close out the UL. And this is something we've done a million times, right? The only thing that's sort of new is this branding business right here, right? But we've done this. This is just a regular old navigation menu, okay? All right. So this is going to be a Navbar. So what do you suppose the class is? Navbar, right? We learned this the other day, Navbar. And this is our brand. So how does the class naming convention work? Yep, Navbar dash what? Brand, yeah. Okay. And this was just a Bootstrap nav, right? And remember the class for that was just called the nav, right? So we'll start there. We're going to modify that. If you'll recall, we did that slightly different the other day. But just a nav. And then these guys are part of the nav. And so do you remember what goes there? Yep, nav dash item. So nav item, and then these guys, do you remember what they were? What's it going to start with? Nav, right? Nav dash link. Yeah, they're links. Okay. So this is actually a pretty good start. There's a few couple things we got to add to this to make it fully a nav bar, but we go here, refresh, and we got something going on here, right? Nice little nav bar at the top, and believe it or not, it is a slightly different color there. It's like a light gray. It's hard to see it. Okay. So remember how we change the background color on anything. Yeah, pick a color, right? And so we tend to like the dark one here, right? BG-dark. There we go. And then for the text, navbar dark. Remember that this is one of the weird cases where you would think you'd want to put light because you want light text on top of it, but this means give me text that would work on a dark navbar, right? Which means it'll give us some lighter text, right? So we get the white Metallica there, okay? All right, but this nav is not just any ordinary nav. It's a special kind of nav, right? What was it? It's a nav bar, right? This UL is inside the nav bar, right? So it's nav bar navigation, right? So now we refresh it. Now we get the style, first of all, also the vertical stacking, which helps with the responsive stuff, but we get that style that we're looking for, right? Okay. So now we want to make it responsive, but this is just the basic foundation of a nav bar right here. Pretty straightforward, okay? All right. So we can, right here, the whole nav here, if you'll recall, we want to put that inside of a div, okay? So we'll just wrap that in a div, and we'll give it a class. Actually, we'll give it the ID of main nav, okay? So that's going to be our div that wraps the navigation. This is what we did the other day. So I know I may be going a little bit too fast, but this is just kind of a review. All right, so that div, we want to collapse it, right? Because when we want to only show it when we're on certain screen sizes. So we're going to start by collapsing it and making it to where we can toggle it, right? So class equals collapse. But this isn't any ordinary collapse. What kind of collapse is it? It's a navbar collapse, right? Okay. Yeah. So it's navbar collapse. It's both, right? Okay, collapse is something that can be applied to a lot of different places in Bootstrap. This is also saying, yeah, not only is it collapse, but it's in a navbar. Okay, it's a navbar collapse. Okay, so now it goes away, right? But then we have to add our little fancy button, right? So we put the button right above that, the div there, just button. And then if you'll recall, we put a span inside of it that had a class that made it into a hamburger, right? That was the syntax right there, that's the HTML. Okay, well the button, its class is, what's it going to start with? Navbar, and it's a toggler, right? It toggles the menu. That's the class, navbar toggler, okay? And then let's just move this to the next line here. Okay, this thing, the class is, what's it going to start with? Navbar, what do you think the next thing is? Yep, it's a navbar toggler icon, right? Okay, so that should give us some style here. Let's see what we got. There's the little thing right there. It doesn't work yet. Clicking on it doesn't do anything, but now it's styled up the way we want, right? So now we just need to connect this button to this div, right? So there are two things that did that. There's data-target, and the target is that div, right? That's the thing we're targeting. Okay, so that's main nav. And now think about these things, these data dashes. Think of them as if there's just some property called target. Okay, now it just so happens in HTML there really is a property called target. It has a whole different purpose. Okay, but forget that that exists. Just imagine it's just a thing called target. And here we're going to do another one, data-toggle. Just imagine it's just some magical property that exists called toggle. The data dash is a little extra thing you have to do in HTML so you can make up your own properties, right? We data dash Beavis, right? So you just imagine there's some property called Beavis, right? So data dash toggle, and what are we toggling? We're toggling a collapse. We're going to see in a minute that you can toggle other things. We're going to toggle a dropdown in just a minute, okay? But this should be everything we need for a menu to make this function here properly. And the fact that it's working tells us our JavaScript is also properly connected, right? That happened to me this morning where I forgot to bring in jQuery. I just had the JavaScript and I could not get the menu to work. I'm like, what am I missing? It turned out I just forgot to put the jQuery in there, okay? So that's working, but we only want it to be like that on small screens, right? So we can, on the nav here, navbar, expand on medium and above, right? So now it's expanded. You can see it on the left there, and we shrink it down, we get this because we're below medium, okay? And we want to move that over to the right. I think it looks better. So on the div itself, we'll just do our flex classes that they have, justify, content, end. And there we go. So there's a good functioning navigation menu, okay? Navbar. All right, everybody breathe. How do we feel about that? It's a lot, okay? I do not expect that you have that memorized. I expect that you understand kind of how it works and sort of the way these things connect together. That's why I start off with just the raw HTML, then we add the classes in. The classes just style it up. That's what classes do in CSS, right? These little extra thingies here, JavaScript's looking for that. The Bootstrap JavaScript's looking for that. And so inside of JavaScript, there's some sort of thing that's, you know, document, get element by ID or something, or selecting it some other way because there's no ID on this. But it's selecting it, and then it's going into the attributes array, and it's looking for the data toggleth element, right? And it's saying, get the one that says collapse, and then somewhere in the JavaScript is connecting it up to line 19. right? That's all JavaScript magic, okay? All right, so this is working. I think it's in pretty good shape here. There's more things you can do with the Navbar, right? There's tons of things. For example, go to the Bootstrap documentation, make sure we're in 4.5, and we will go to examples here. And right here, you can see a whole bunch of different navigation bars, right? There are different breakpoints here. These are probably going to expand at small, medium, or large, or whatever. And then there's ones with a search bar. You got some centered stuff, right? A whole bunch of different things. There's a lot more you can do even on top of all that, okay? So look at the documentation. Let's move past the Navbar stuff. That's sort of review. Let's make a drop-down menu. So we're going to make a drop-down menu of the about right here. So instead of about going to a particular page, it's going to go to, well, it's going to make a little drop-down menu, and we're going to pick something off the menu, okay? So the first thing I want to do here is let's break this down so we have a little bit of space here, okay? Now we've got a little bit more space to work. And this is no longer going to be linking off to somewhere. I mean, it's not going anywhere anyway. We just have the octothorpe. But in real life, we'd have something there, right? Normally, you would have like about.html or whatever, right? But because this is not going to go anywhere, we actually do want to keep the octothorpe. This is the only time where that's really the legitimate thing to put there. Like this one up here should say home.html or index.html, I should say. That should say merch.html and tour dates or whatever. But this one is now going to be a little heading that's not going anywhere. It's just going to be a toggler, right? Okay, so we want to click on that, and then inside of it, we're going to have a div. This is all part of this one LI right here. See that? And inside of this div, we're going to have the submenu. And we'll just have those going nowhere for now. And so I want to know, about James. Right, so it's about each member. So this is the basic structure here. Now, notice I didn't put any of the classes or anything, right? We haven't turned it into a dropdown. That's just the markup. But I want to make sure you see, just clear this out a little bit here. This is a list item that says home, right? That's this guy right here, just says home. This one says merch right here, next line. That's just this guy. This one looked like that a minute ago, right? But we're tweaking it a little bit. So the first thing is this list item, we want this to be a dropdown. So dropdown, okay? That's the first thing you're going to do. Next up, we got this as a dropdown. This is a drop-down menu, right? That's a very accurate and descriptive word for what we're looking at right there, okay? So this is a drop-down menu, and here it is. It's just these links here. Now this one, these anchors have to have a class on them. Everything has a class in Bootstrap, right? You just put classes all over the place, right? This is one of the ones that's not as intuitive as I wish it was, as I wish it were. Class equals dropdown. That's the way it should be. But I'd like to think that it's link, right? But no, it's item. Yeah, dropdown item, right? Okay, so we're close. We're not quite there. Okay, if I click on this, nothing's happening yet. We haven't hooked it all up yet. But we've got the style we need, right? So this is hidden right now, okay? And then we have this little guy right here. Now this guy, he's the button that you're going to click on. He's actually the drop-down toggle, right? So drop-down toggle. That's his class. He's still a nav link, okay? All right? Then we also have to deal with this data toggle thing like we did up here, right? So we just put it here, data toggle, but this time we're not toggling a collapse, we're toggling a dropdown. Okay, so you can toggle multiple things here. This is another thing that JavaScript just looks for and knows what to do with it. We'll see if we got everything. Now there's a little arrow there, that's nice. Click it and there you go, your little drop-down menu, okay? And you can click on Robert and it'll take you to whatever page you tell it to take you to, okay? So there's not a whole lot there. We just took the thing that looked like this, we added the drop-down class to the LI and the toggle to the title here, the about, and then we made a drop-down menu and gave them drop-down items. And then we connected it all up with the JavaScript magic with that right there, okay? So the reason I wanted to show you that is because your final project, if you tried to put all your links in the navigation, right, there's a lot of projects and it's too many. So maybe you want to break it down into plain HTML projects, CSS projects, and JavaScript projects or something like that, right? Okay. Okay, any other questions on the dropdown? Good? All right, so Navbar, that's review from the other day. Now you got a dropdown so you can do that with your final project. Let's take a look at cards, right? That's the thing I thought was going to disappear in version 5. Turns out it's not, which is cool because cards are pretty cool, okay? So all they are is it's just a blocked out little content that has, you can put like images and things in it that just kind of groups everything together and it just makes it look nice. It kind of looks like, you guys know what a Polaroid photograph looks like? It sort of looks like a Polaroid picture, kind of. It looks sort of like that, okay? So what I'm going to do is put it inside the grid, right? We have the grid. We learned about that the other day. We might as well use it. Don't have to. You can put a card wherever you want, but might as well put it in the grid so we have some layout. So how do I start that off? It's going to be a div, obviously, for just the grid. What's the first class that we got to use? Yeah, it has to go inside of a container. Okay, so it goes in the container, and then in the container, what do we have? Row, there you go, yeah. So we have a row, and inside the row, what do you suppose goes in there? Columns, yeah, okay. So let's just do this real quick. So what's that gonna do? Yeah, it'll be 3 columns that are all the same size. That'll just say, oh, that says H1. I meant to say hi, but that's fine. That's the computer way to say hi. There you go, right? Just says hi right there, okay? And we can see how much those take up space by just putting a color on it. So BG color, oh, what am I doing? Info and warning and secondary. And there you go. You can see how much space they're taking up, right? But we're not going to use the backgrounds. Okay, so now we have the columns here. Let's actually put some content in the column. Instead of just saying hi, we're going to put a card in there. Okay, card's the brand new thing. Everything else is grid stuff from the other day. We should have a rough familiarity with it, right? So, of course, it's going to be a card, so the class is card, right? And then inside of this, you can put images, and you can put like titles, and you can put, I don't know, some text or whatever, right? Just put whatever you want, okay? So we'll start off by putting an image. Just start there. Image source equals image slash, I think that's what it called it. I'm sure you know what that stands for. Okay, master puppets, yeah. Yeah, and then, so this is an image, right? So the class is, of course, what's it going to start with? Card, yeah, there you go. Card dash img. And this is actually going to go at the top. So there's actually a card image bottom, card image top. Okay, it styles them slightly differently. And then we're going to do, like, say, an H4 class equals card dash title, right? And we'll just say master of puppets. That's our H4. We can even do like maybe an H5 class equals card subtitle, right? Okay, and we'll obey your master. Okay, and we can put some text, right? So if ever there were a time to use Metallica Ipsum, it is now, right? But we're just going to grab like a little bit of it, not a ton, okay? And so this is going to go in a paragraph, and of course the class is what? Card dash text. Very good. Good guess. Okay, there's the text, and we'll close that out. And let's just see what that looks like. Start there. Okay, so we'll go back here and refresh. And there you go. That looks pretty cool. Okay. Oh, I missed something. Yeah. All of that stuff, although it's inside of a card, it has to go inside of a card body tag, okay, or a card body class. So div class equals card body, okay? So all that stuff we just did goes inside of there. right? There we go, okay? So that's closing out the card right there. And this is closing out the card body right there, okay? So now refresh it, and you see it looks a little bit better there, right? Okay. Another common thing you might see is, for example, this subtitle here, to give it text muted. So it's just a little bit grayer, right? And then you might see something like at the bottom here, an anchor tag, and it's of course going to be card-link, right? And like, you know, buy now or something like that, right? Okay. And so now you have a little link at the bottom there, which you can turn into a button by just adding the button class, right? BTN and give it a color, which will go with danger. That's red, matches the album cover. There you go, nice little card, okay? Now you can put, I think I'm gonna put a little margin top on the master puppets there. MT, margin top, right? And then we'll do like level 1 probably is good enough. Let's see. Yeah, maybe level 2. That's pretty good, okay? So now what I'm going to do to save a little bit of time here, I'm going to take the whole column and we're going to replace these guys here. Okay, so now let's refresh it. That's pretty cool again, right? Okay. Not to mention, I mean, the artwork helps, obviously, right? That's some cool artwork, okay? But this is, it's pretty easy to do this, right? And so real quick, let's just do that one more time with another row, okay? So where's my row end? So that whole bit right there, that's a row. I'm gonna grab that, paste it. So now this is my second row here, okay? All right, here we go, refresh it. And that just looks really cool. And not because I've got any kind of sense of design, but because Bootstrap does, right? So now let's go take a look at this is a component, cards, right here. And there's a lot of different things you can do. Here's basically what we just did, right? But there's other things too. You can do it without an image, which it doesn't look as good, but you can do it without an image. You can put an image at the bottom. You can do this where it's like little list groups here, which we haven't really talked about what is a list group, but you can put these in there. And so we know that the school uses Bootstrap, right? If you go here though, on current student page, that's what they're using right there. Okay, those are cards. Now notice they've styled them a little bit differently, right? They got the image in the middle here or whatever, and this thing at the top. They also have this little roller effect, okay? And they're probably not using the Bootstrap grid. They might be using the CSS grid to get this layout the way it's sort of tiled like this, okay? But they have a little bullet point list here, and you can do all kinds of things, right? Just a disclaimer, I'm not 100% sure that they're using cards here, but it looks like they are. And I know they're using Bootstrap. I know that for a fact. They're also using Bootstrap version 3, and the cards were different. Things were a little bit different then, but I'm 99% sure they're using cards here. And even if they weren't, you could do that with cards, right? So how do we feel about cards here? We doing all right? A lot more stuff you can do, right? Check out the documentation. Okay, last thing here. We're gonna do a carousel. You guys have seen carousels before. I've got one on my site. Right here on the home page, there's a carousel at the top that we wait a second, that'll scroll. There we go. And then we can also hit the buttons here to make it scroll, right? Okay, so we're gonna look at how to build one of those. It's not that hard. I mean, none of this stuff is hard. It's just, you gotta remember the structure and you gotta remember the CSS, right? Which is, if you built it yourself, you'd have to come up with the structure and come up with the CSS. Well, they've done the work for you. All right, so we're gonna put that at the top here, between the navigation and the container right there. So we're going to put it right between those guys. Okay. Get a little bit of room to work. And of course, we're going to wrap it in a div, right? And I'll even start off by giving it its class because we know what it's going to be. What do you think? Carousel. The hardest part about this is remembering how to spell carousel. Okay. So there's lots of things you can put in there. Like for example, we got these little navigation thingies right here. You've also probably seen the ones that have like a little dot or circle down here that shows you which image you're actually looking at. You're looking at the middle one or the fourth one or whatever, okay? So you can do all of that here. We're gonna do it in baby steps here, but we can put, those are called indicators, and then we can put the images, and we can put the navigation, those little left and right things, navigation, okay? And so they each kind of go in their own little section here, right? They each kind of go in their own little section. So let's start with just the images. All right, so we can just see automatically sliding images, easy enough, right? Of course, it goes into a div. You put all the images into a div. And this particular div is called the inner carousel, or carousel inner, right? So we'll give it a class, carousel inner, okay? And we just put the image in there, right? So image source equals image slash Metallica1 dot JPEG, and we'll do, I played around with these, and these are the best ones of the bunch that I've got downloaded here. That's it. That's the structure right there. There's really not much to it. We got to connect it all up with the data dash business, right, and with a couple of class names, but that's it, okay? So in a minute, we're going to put some code up here and some code down here to add the other things to it. But how do we feel that that's okay right there? We good? Okay, so we got the carousel inner, and then we have this image here, each of the three images. Those images need to go inside of their own divs, okay? So we're just going to put each of those in a div, and of course there's going to be a class. Any guesses what the class might be called? Carousel something, right? Carousel item. Okay, they're items in the carousel. Okay, so they have the carousel item. Now, we're going to leave off some of the styling that's required, just so you can see why it's required, okay? But let's start here and see what we have, if we have anything. And there's just a big blank screen. What's going on, right? Where'd everything go? Okay, yeah. So there's pieces of this that we still have to build to make this appear, right? So we got, it's like we've left some stuff hanging here, right? Okay, so we have the div carousel, and we also are going to add this other class called slide, okay? Then the data thing, right? We have this one called data-ride. So again, imagine that's just some property called ride, like it's just an attribute, right? And the ride, I'm not sure exactly why they called it ride. I'd have to look that up in the documentation. It may, oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, of course, duh. Carousel ride, of course. Okay, so we got the carousel slide, we got the ride carousel. Then we have the carousel inner, which holds the images, okay? And I think that is all the stuff we need to put other than the few styling things I mentioned to you. Oh, there's one other thing. It's still gonna show nothing here, okay? The reason is, we have to make one of the images active, okay? We also got to close out our divs here. Don't forget that, okay? So which one of these items is active? We'll just go with the first one, okay? So this is a start. Now, notice this is kind of ugly here, right? If we wait a second though, it takes 5 seconds, it'll actually scroll. So we'll give it a second. Okay, there it goes. Notice the height is weird, the width is weird, okay? Couple reasons for that. Reason number one, the default behavior of an image is display inline. Okay, we want them to be block level. So I'm going to remove that active class so I can do my multi-line select here, and then we'll put the active back in a second. But the class on this image is display block. Right? You remember that from the other day? Okay, that's thing number one. Thing number two is there's a property or a class that's called W dash, and we can do dash 100. That means 100 viewport widths, right? So we do that, and we have to put the active back on here. Now we get something that's a little bit better, right? It takes up the full screen, and if your mouse is over it, it will not scroll. Okay, my mouse is there, it won't scroll. But if I move my mouse, it'll actually start scrolling if we wait 5 seconds. Let's speed that up a little bit. because we don't want to have to wait for that the whole time we're doing this on the video. Okay, so all you do to speed that up is right here on the carousel outer, where are you? This one right here, data dash interval, and set it equal to whatever milliseconds you want. Okay, 1,000. So now when we refresh, move my mouse, it should start scrolling every second. Okay, that's a lot to watch, but just for testing purposes, we're just going to do that for now. Okay, that's the basics of a carousel. It's not that complicated. The real deal is that we just put our images in a carousel inner, and then we set this to data ride, a carousel ride. Just too funny. Okay, and that's it. It toggles through the images. Okay, let's add some controllers to it, right? Let's also make it a better height. Okay, real easy way to do that, right here on the div, we'll just add a style, inline style. You should do this in your style sheet, but for right now, we'll just do it here. And we'll just say height is 50 viewport heights. Okay, that'll just make it 50% of the screen. And now that looks a little bit better, right? Now notice that they're like the Metallica logo is kind of too low there on that middle image. Okay, so we can just do some quick positioning for that. Again, I recommend you doing this in your style sheet, but for the sake of the video, I'm going to move that active so I can do multi-line select again. And we'll just put some style in the images. Style, position, relative, and we'll do a top of negative 50 pixels. And that should do it. Put the active back on. You guys understand why I'm removing that active, right? Just so I can line my text up. Okay, refresh. And now that moved the images up a little bit, now it looks a lot better, right? That's pretty cool, I think. All right, so let's slow that down just a bit. We know it's functioning properly, so don't need to watch that. Okay, so this is a pretty good looking site overall. I mean, again, it's not expert level, but it's not bad. Let's put some navigation in it now. And the way we do that, this is where the markup gets a little bit out of control. Okay, it's not too bad, but it's not super simple either. But it just starts with an anchor tag and a span inside of it. Okay, that's it. That's how it starts. Just like the hamburger menu, there's that little, what was it, Navbar dash toggler icon. Well, this is the same thing. We're going to make a little icon that's that little triangle looking thing that you navigate with, right? So class on the span is equal to carousel controller control previous, right? The previous button icon. Okay? The names are intuitive. You just have to learn what the intuition is, right? So carousel control previous icon. That icon's always going to be there when you're putting in those span tags to make the little, like the hamburger menu and all that. Okay. So that'll give us a little previous button. And then we want to link this particular anchor tag. We want to link it to the carousel that it's within. So we're going to need an ID on our carousel. Okay. ID equals main carousel. All right. And so inside of our anchor tag, we have to put the href is the main carousel. Okay, so that just tells Bootstrap that, hey, we're talking, this thing is manipulating this thing. Okay, what do you suppose the class might be? Yeah, carousel, always a good start. It's actually the control, right? The carousel control. Okay, and it's specifically the previous control. You see the convention there? Just like before, we had data dash toggler, or we had, yeah, data dash, or not data dash toggler, but navbar dash toggler, right? Well, the icon for it was navbar dash toggler icon. Well, this is the carousel control previous, so the icon's the previous icon, okay? So that's almost it, right? We're not quite there. There's one last thing, and that's getting the data piece of it right here. Data dash slide. We're going to do the previous, right? Okay, so let's see if that's working. Refresh. And there it is right there. It's hard to see, but it's there. Click it and it seems to be working, okay? Now let's just do a next one. That's easy. Just change all those to next, right? And that's all you need to do. So now you got both of those. There's one on the right there and one on the left, okay? That's it. Okay, the last thing here, we're gonna put those little indicators down below that tell us which picture we're on, okay? That's gonna go at the top here. And this is actually an ordered list, OL. And what do we put inside of OLs? Yeah, same thing we put inside of unordered lists, right? Just LIs, right? And there are 3 images, so we need 3 of those, okay? And of course, this is the indicators, the little dots or whatever at the bottom. They're actually little dashes, but they're the indicators. So class equals carousel indicators, right? Okay, so inside the LIs, there are no classes, except for one we'll talk about in just a second. But there's the data target business, right? So what are we targeting? Data target. We're actually targeting the main carousel, right? There's also a data slide to. In other words, which image are you going to slide to when you click on it? Which one is it connected to, right? So these are just numbered. They're just indexed in the order they show up. So this image right here is 0, the next one's 1, and so forth. Okay, that's almost everything. The last bit is we have to pick one to be active. And the one you want to pick is the one that you picked as active in the images down below, right? We chose this first image to be active, so that is the 0th image. So that gets a class of active. That should be everything. Did I spell? Oh, I did, you're right. Indicators, there we go. So refresh. There we go. So now they're right down here, these little white bars down here. If you click on them, it'll actually take you to the appropriate image. But if you just click on the little arrow up here, it changes. You can see it's highlighting a different one down below. It's hard to see, but it's there. Okay. Let me show you one last thing here, okay? On the carousel, you can actually, where's our carousel starting? Right here. You can, if you want to, do carousel fade. Okay, which gives you this effect, right? So when we click on each one, it fades instead of slides. Maybe that's better for what you're trying to do on your site. Okay, that's everything that we're going to look at for Bootstrap. I know it's been a 3-day crash course on Bootstrap. My goal here, I've said this before, throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall, hope some of it sticks, right? My intent here wasn't to, quote, teach you Bootstrap. It was to expose you to it so you know all the things it can do. And did I show you all the things it can do? Not even close. But now you understand a little bit about the documentations. You also got the good news that version 5 is available now, so you can play around there. But my hope is that I've at least got you interested and piqued, like, oh, this is pretty cool, and it can do a lot of fun things, and I can go look at the documentation and figure out how to do it, and I can copy the code and use it as a foundation, right? All right, any questions about anything we've looked at? Good?